So this is the session for delivering and adding value to a design hop. A Q&A session about that. This session is being recorded. Sorry, I should have mentioned that at the very beginning, but this will be to help other people that couldn't make it today to hear more about it. We've done some check-ins, we'll run through background info, then we'll dive straight into questions, and then we'd love to spend some time doing a few reflections as well from all of you if we have some time for that. Please just post questions in the chat. We haven't got a Slido or anything for this session because it's quite a nice small group, so Ab and I will be monitoring that. So hopefully everyone's in the right place. Welcome. We are really excited to have you guys here today, finding out about this brief. If you haven't heard of Catalyst before, we are a network initiative set up to increase the digital data and design capacity in social sector organizations and to really accelerate the use of digital data and design in the social sector, so charities and social enterprises. Open Projects is the portal where we publish briefs from the Catalyst network that we would like partners across the network to pitch for. So we've got sort of this open page that you will all have seen these briefs on, and the brief that we're discussing today with the Design Hop Discovery Learning Program is one of the two that are currently live. There will be more coming live in the next week, I should add. So if you're primed and ready for more good stuff, then it's coming. So what do we mean by discovery for this particular piece of work? One sec, I might just ask if my housemate can be a bit quieter on the tap. Cool. Okie doke. So we've got a learning journey for the participants, the charity participants, that we would like them to get through essentially understanding what the discovery process is. So it's a bit of training and working with charities to define their problem, identify potential solutions, but most importantly, work really closely with their users to understand how they experience the problem. Also, it will help them hopefully become better digital partners for when they continue to work with digital development partners in the future, and help them identify next steps, both internal and external. So that will be in the sort of final week, there will be the opportunity for them to split into two groups. One group which will be focusing on internal stakeholder engagements type challenges, and the other group which wants to do further development work. So supporting either of those two routes according to whichever is the need sort of just shows towards. So who should apply to support this? Well, we're looking for agencies that are experienced in working with social organizations, supporting organizations through a discovery phase, working with cohorts, because we will be looking at grouping charities in groups of 8 to 10 for each of these learning programs. So small enough to hopefully build a good sense of peer support and community, and also kind of keep on top of all of them individually, but also, yeah, large enough to have that useful sharing nature. And also agencies that have experience in training social organizations, particularly if you have this specific sort of experience in taking them through this learning journey to support their own capability building, because we've recognized that being able to do discovery with organizations is quite different to being able to teach discovery for organizations. Sometimes they go beautifully hand in hand, but not always. And we're probably looking more for the training side here if possible. So the kind of stuff that we'll be teaching is, if any of you have seen this slide in any of our presentations before, we love this one, teaching people to do iterative agile delivery. We start with the skateboard, some people say MVP, minimum viable product, and slowly build up from there rather than starting with a big solution that might not actually be needed. So just helping organizations realize the benefits of observing user behavior and tweaking and iterating based on that, and also the benefits of reuse and repurposing existing tools and tech as far as possible rather than building something completely new. This is, I guess, some of the stuff you might be doing with the charities. Working on a screen with Post-it notes. The structure of the program will be 20 days on the part of the charity's time. It starts the 28th of September, ends on the 19th of October. Those dates are fixed. Their playback window will be from 20th to the 23rd of October. So that's the kind of part of the structure for them where they present what they've learned and any particular insights, and also any methodology that they've really picked up and found really valuable to their network. So each charity will be applying with a network of at least 10 other organizations that they are naming in their application process. And the idea is that this will really help disseminate the learning and also any particular outputs that might be valuable to that network as well. It will be working on cohorts, as I mentioned, and there will be opportunity to pitch for to support development projects. So if you have been the learning partner, taking charities through this learning journey, and you would also like to pitch to work on any briefs that are developed for the next phase of work, which will be more actually kind of building and testing prototypes. Not necessarily tech prototypes, I should add. It could be that their problem area is something around internal organizational change and they need some strategic support, but prototypes in that kind of loosest sense of the word, you would be able to do that as well. So here is the structure and kind of time frame on a calendar view, so you can kind of see how it stretches across. Within this, there's no kind of fixed dates or structure. So obviously the design hop has its own format and process to follow through, but it's pretty flexible. And then the playback at the end there as well. And then if they wanted to apply for further support, there it is as well. So I'm going to hand back over to Ab for the questions. I might just go back into gallery view for this, and Ab, you can see them, I think, can't you? Have you got view of the questions, or shall I show a screen with them on? Oh, you're on mute.
I'll just pull them up. So yes, it'll be nicer for everyone just to be on gallery view, I reckon.
Yeah. Cool. Stop share.
Great, just finding them. Cool. Okay, so first of all, I think there was a really interesting question here, which was how have organisations participating over the last few months found getting users in place for user research and or kind of skateboard testing over the 4-week timescale? So yeah, I think it was a really good question, no doubt on kind of many people's minds. So I think that we found that actually, depending on the specific user group, but I think quite a lot of users have actually been almost easier to reach by charities in some cases, because actually instead of, I think, relying on having to find time for them to be able to come into, you know, their centre somewhere and really rely on that face-to-face kind of way of doing things, you know, on the phone or on WhatsApp video or Zoom has now become the default. And I think there's even some that have used actually their messaging services to conduct that a bit asynchronously too. So actually that's changed a bit. But I would say the real challenge for the charities in that time scale has not so much been the time, but almost the confidence side of it as well. And actually really having the confidence that they can actually conduct that interview process and they're going to be able to manage it well. I mean, I think it's quite natural for a lot of people to feel quite awkward in that scenario as well, especially when it's the first time that you're really going into it. So we've really noticed that where people have been working with another team member on the course, just has to be one, doesn't even need to be like 3. That has really, really helped them both to feel accountable and to feel really confident with each other and to, yeah, have that just kind of, you know, camaraderie and support doing it. So I'd say that actually has been the biggest blocker with this. And I think that there's a huge, now we've obviously would have a lot of your time and the charities' time actually being, you know, paid for, whereas everything else that they've done before has been it's free to engage with the design hop, but it certainly comes out of your own time as an organisation. I think that we see there's huge scope to do a lot more support in that user research area. So not only around the quality of it, because if you've had a chance to look at the materials, you'll see that we do quite a lot of prompting around what makes a good question, the concept of user research, and things like that. But actually it's quite lo-fi still, and I imagine that having a lot more time to practice with one another, really feel confident around that, could be really helpful for their confidence and for the actual quality of the research that they're going to be able to pull out as well. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. So the second question I've just touched on as well, which was within the current design hop model, what support is provided for user research. So in the current model that you'll be kind of working from, there's a couple of videos which kind of more introduce the kind of concept of user research. And if you've had a chance to log on to the Thinkific platform and have a look at the videos, then you can kind of watch them in a bit of depth yourself to just kind of get the vibe around how we've been framing it and so on. It kind of introduces it. Then there's that kind of sheet I mentioned that gives prompts around what makes a great user research question. And then we've actually found that in the sessions, kind of pairing them up to do a bit of peer support in breakout rooms with one another, to actually use that sheet themselves and sense check their kind of questions on what they're really trying to dive and engage there, has worked really well too. But then I think that's, and then there's a few examples for sure as well. Examples, obviously, we all know go down really well for helping to make sense of what it is that we're looking for. But then I think beyond that, it's really more like if they then choose to get back in touch. So quite often charities will ask you, okay, here are my all written questions now. I've gone away and thought about it. Can you take a look at it? Which is really great. And then there's, I would say, some really light touch stuff that we do around here's how you might start then to synthesize this. And I think, again, there's a really big scope there in actually really understanding what is our user research telling us. We barely touch on bias, but you all know it's a huge, deep area. So I think there's a lot of space there as well to really, I think a lot of them are actually really quite keen to hear a lot more about that too, because they quite often request some sort of articles or reading around it to go away and think about too. So I think there's a hunger there, and certainly a lot more scope too. Yeah, so I hope that answers that question as well in a bit more depth. It's kind of, it's interesting for us because in the previous face-to-face design hop model that Ellie just mentioned, that we used to kind of tour with various partners around the country, because it was face-to-face and we could only get that group together for like 5 hours in that one space, we talked about user research and did exercises, but we actually didn't quite get a chance to road test it because it was very rare that anyone's users would actually be in the same building at that current moment. So actually I think there's, the huge kind of area around that and that synthesis piece too. So yeah, I hope that explains that. And another question, how do you see this being expanded upon? Do you already have ideas? So I think that we're really keen to, I think, just emphasize that, sure, like we have ideas, and hopefully you've all had a chance to look at that document. I think it was meant to be a 1-pager. I think it's turned out being about a 4-pager that kind of described design hops, and we highlighted, I think, a few of the areas that we sense that there's real scope to bring a lot more to and spend a lot more time supporting or working through the charities with. But I think, again, just to emphasize that we're really excited to actually hear from all of you, all the different small exercises that you've already done that work to really beef up that area, to bring that in and really add to it. And likewise, I know some organizations really bring quite a different specific lens to your work. So for example, you might be approaching something from like a radical, justice and equality view. You might be approaching it from a co-design point of view. And we're super excited to see what would the design hop, which is a learning journey we know works with charities, how would that produce better or different results through various different lenses. Just like if, sometimes you see those song competitions where, an artist has put out a single, but then they ask, does anyone want to remix it? And on SoundCloud, you suddenly have 100 different versions of that song. and they're all amazing, and you can happily listen to them all, and they all might be great at different moments. So that's another reason why we're all going to get a chance then to come together in a couple of times as well throughout the discovery process, to really learn those different kind of tools and approaches from each other too, and see where they can all build upon kind of all of our future practice long after this discovery program. So yeah, that's really the kind of vibe we're getting out there. But I will drop again a link to that 4-pager just so you can see the kind of main areas that kind of we outlined could much better be improved.
Done it, Ab. I'm way ahead of you.
Oh, you have? Oh, amazing. I've shunted the chat bar to the side so I can have the other questions on my other side of the screen. So yeah, do take another look at that. Ellie, I think the next one here, oh, actually, this is a good one. I didn't spot this one before. At what point of deviation does this become not a design hop? Hopefully, I think kind of that emphasis on kind of remixing things and really bringing your own, I guess, take on things might quite answer that. Like we know the design hop works as kind of a minimum viable learning experience for charities. Hiya. A minimum viable learning experiences for charities who don't have their time funded to take part in it. So that kind of cadence and those tools and that way of framing things really does seem to click and work in their head. But really, whatever you build on or change around that, so long as you can evidence that it's kind of made sense, then I think that, you know, that's kind of the vibe, really, I think. Ellie, did you have anything extra to add to that or an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're not being precious about what is or isn't a design hop, basically. It's already a co-created thing that has been morphed and evolved through working with loads of different partners. So it's the idea is just that there is some tried and tested content and a kind of a structure to go through that we know works. So we appreciate that a lot of people have a load of great ideas that might not have got that kind of backbone already underlying it. So it's something to build on that might help you. Yeah. Did you want me to take the next one, Ab?
Yes.
So this one is, and welcome Rose, by the way. Good to see you. No worries. You've made it for most of the Q&A, so all good. We're just running through them now. So this one says the start date is 28th of September and you're suggesting a 4-week course. Is there a date when the course has to be delivered by? E.g., is the timing flexible so we can do the design development in October and deliver it in November? Hopefully I've probably answered that in the presentation, but unfortunately not. It is a fixed 4 weeks, and that is because we then are inviting organisations to apply to the round 2 of development funding. We've got 1 round of development funding currently open for organisations that can evidence really well that they have done discovery themselves, but for those that are going through the learning programme, we want them to be able to then cut that sort of second phase of funding if necessary. So that kicks in immediately after the program, the applications for that. So unfortunately, there's no wiggle room there at all. But within those 4 weeks, you have more flexibility. Shall I do the next couple as well? So we've got cohorts will consist of 8 to 10 organizations. How many participants are you considering to have in each cohort? That's a really good question. As Ab said, we found that it's really helpful when people work in buddies or pairs in an organization rather than doing it solo. This isn't a requirement. It will depend a lot on the capacity of the organizations applying. And yeah, we know that so many charities are so stretched at the moment. So we're trying to make it as kind of open as possible for them, what works on their side. So you might find that actually it's shared between more than 2 people, that maybe there's kind of 4 people coming in and out, but we just won't know, unfortunately, until we have the applicants successfully confirmed. If you are successful in getting the learning journey brief partnership, then we will connect you with your cohort members with kind of a week of contracting before the kickoff, and that would be the time to kind of discuss with them things like giving them a prompt around, oh, maybe you want to make sure that if you're on your own, you have some internal support and you can buddy up, maybe not in this first week, but later in the 4 weeks. So that would be an opportunity to communicate anything that you feel is really valuable and important to the charities then. Then the next question, I think this one's more for you, Ab. What were the completion rates of the activities for part 1, part 2 and part 3?
Yeah, that's another really great question. So I would say for we've tested a lot of different versions of the design hop being delivered in various different forms online now. And I'd say that this version with kind of those self-serve content to learn from and do activities with, but those quite clear chances to come together and learn and reflect together, has a fairly low dropout rate. So charities are certainly, if they're going to drop out, it will be after sort of the initial welcome session, where just natural things come up, like people realize actually it's not quite for them, that's not what they were looking for when they were still thinking about digital. We've had some people sadly be furloughed immediately after they've started, or realize that they're not going to be able to commit the time to it that they realized it needs. It's not just a webinar that you can tune into over lunch, for instance, but still a relatively low dropout amount. And then it's very unlikely for charities to drop out then, I'd say, in the other parts. However, I like the way that the question's worded because it's around completion rates, and we do find that not everyone does complete their user research, so you can say that then certainly has a bit of a knock-on effect on some of the other activities, and that's again why I've kind of emphasized that I think that's a real area for that confidence and support to really be kind of bolstered in. So it's certainly something that obviously we're sort of trying to work on and address with them in that kind of minimal way. So it's certainly improved. And yeah, when we first were testing this, we gave them even less time to get that done too, which certainly stretching it out for about 2 weeks seems to have worked a lot better. So that can have a knock-on effect. And then likewise, by the time we reach kind of part 3, and it's really time then to have actually taken all the way through and have a skateboard minimum viable product idea. Actually, some charities, what they realized through doing their user research or kind of in the asset mapping and kind of landscape viewing exercises, actually they've gone down a slightly different road and realized actually maybe what they need is connections with other organizations, and they've begun pursuing those. So they're it's not quite a testable product that we would think of, but actually they've gone in another route that's actually solved their problem, but it was only kind of by thinking things through in this design way that's kind of led them there. So yeah, certainly I think these lot will probably be more focused, I imagine, with kind of your guidance, but certainly be prepared for things to maybe take a bit of an unexpected turn along the way. So yeah, I hope that answers that.
I'd also add to that we've never tried it with the charities having some funding before.
Yeah.
And that is going to make a big difference, we hope. So the charities will have 5K to help them cover the cost of their time in this program. And there's an expectation for them to spend about 20 days over the course of the 4 weeks. And that could be spread across several people or just one person full time for that period. So our hope is that buys them a little bit of space to do this properly and to really kind of have the headspace as much as the practical space to attend sessions and stuff.
Yeah, great. I think that follows on quite well to the question that's kind of underneath that as well, which is charities will be expected to commit around 5 days a week to the programme. How has this worked for charities in the past? So it's a bit of a test for us to kind of find that out, but through a similar-ish programme that we've sort of currently been running called Explore, essentially we found that actually it might be 5 days, but it's generally spread around several different team members. So it's not all just suddenly become one person's full-time job, which I imagine is probably what you would kind of guess at anyway. That's great. We've got one here, Ellie. Do we need to be incorporated in the UK? Will you accept US-based LLCs?
So I checked with our finance manager on this one, who says he'd certainly prefer them to be in the UK because our contract will be subject to English law. So it will be difficult to enforce if there is no UK connection. So I think ideally, yes, is the answer to that one. If there is a completely stellar applicant that we can kind of get into a discussion with specifically about that, then let's do that. But I think ideally, yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, the next one looks like one for you, Ab.
Yeah, so the next one is probably also on everyone's minds in some form or other. Will existing Design Hop resources be provided? Can the existing program on Thinkific that you've been invited to have a look around be duplicated and then amended as necessary? Yes, this is a great question. So I think we've had a good chat about this and I think about what might actually be best for it. And we've kind of come to the conclusion that simply duplicating what we currently have on Thinkific, it probably actually won't be the best fit for you and will be a bunch of like faff for us and faffing between one another anyway. Because actually what we'd love is that if, you know, in the future and you've got your own course, you can just use that with whoever as well. So it makes sense not to just rely on our kind of existing system. However, what we will do is make sure that you have all the bits that make up the Thinkific. So we'll very happily share with you the service blueprint that we've got to date. And I think that will make kind of figure out your own kind of add-ons and various iterations and things like that even kind of make more sense when you can see it all visually. All of the kind of email text that we use, and again, that's obviously all on the service blueprint as well for participants, all the session plans and the links to, you know, various kind of Google Jamboards and things like that we kind of use in the session, all of the activity sheets that are on the Thinkific, all of the text and framing and curriculum on Thinkific, and all of the videos that are currently also used on Thinkific. So really, if you were like, I love Thinkific, we just want to make our own, it will simply be a case of copying, pasting, uploading, and then just changing some of the colors to maybe match your kind of own organization's brand. But if you're a bit more confident with something like Google Classroom, that's been working out great, find a way to make that work, or you want to test delivering it over email or over WhatsApp even, you know, whatever you get the sense might really work well with your cohort, kind of really like up for that completely as well. And you can obviously iterate all the session plans and things like that as well once you've had a chance to make your own copy. And I think that flows quite well as well to this kind of next question that we've got over here, which is a hybrid approach between design hops and custom content creation possible? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So hopefully that kind of frames it nicely for you in that. I think we're all kind of really on board here not to just go about reinventing the wheel. So if there's already a video or a worksheet of, you know, one of us saying it or doing it, it might make sense to use that. But when you really see that there's something missing or something you can really add, or you absolutely need to frame in a different way for it to make sense under that kind of lens that you're approaching it with, yeah, like go for it. So yeah, just make sure that that's kind of all kind of part of your plan. So hopefully that answers that. Ellie, did you want to add anything to that?
No, other than we would hope there was some custom content creation, because otherwise there's not much added value. So yeah, that's just really looking forward to seeing how you interpret that in your applications, because that's your scope to be super creative, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because the design hop at the moment is kind of like it's the skateboard version of itself. We know it's the minimal viable thing that works really well with charities to create that kind of mindset and behavior change and to create some minimum viable digital products to get ahead and test out. And hopefully you had a chance to see that blog that I think we linked as well from the 4-pager that really details a charity's experience using it and what it made them realize and discover, which I think can summarize it quite nicely. But these guys have got way more time on their hands to really play with things. So absolutely, it's a real invitation to be creative and be really practical about what else can really help them to really, really kind of boost that journey. So we've got a question here as well that I think is really interesting. Is CAST planning to set up a space, e.g. Slack, for partners and charities to communicate with each other, or is that up to the partner to decide? Ellie, do you want to have your take first?
Yeah, I mean, part of this session is to try and understand what would be helpful, and how what is their appetite for. So it's not something that we have planned, but it would be interesting to see if that's in people's applications as something that would be a really valuable additional space. One thing that we do have planned is spaces for partners to connect and share, as Ab was talking about before. But a space that includes the charities as well isn't something we've got planned. We know it's happened on other funds, and had varying degrees of success and engagement. So I think, yeah, there's obviously, we all know there's different pros and cons with different platforms and all that kind of thing. So I think it would be interesting to see your rationale for why that would be valuable and whose needs it serves.
Yeah, great. This might be another one for you, Ellie. At what point does the next step support for organisations fit? Is this after, during, or before the playback period?
Cool. This was one we just had posted in the chat.
So efficient.
I know, this is like live Q&A. So the next step support, that's essentially probably, we're envisaging the week 3 of the 4-week period, where I mentioned they kind of divide into 2 camps, and some of them will be looking at internal stuff and some of them will be looking at external stuff. That is kind of like what that whole week is then looking at what comes next, and the playback is really to help facilitate that as well. So the playback on one level is to kind of codify all the good stuff that they've learned and all of the kind of insights that they'd like to share. And it is to also enable them to share that with their network and hopefully begin a bit of a conversation there, and something that will hopefully continue beyond this one program. Some of them have really established networks already and are very used to doing that role of kind of sharing and convening. Others won't be, but it could be a really nice kind of kickstart for that. And so that's kind of that playback period of the last week, is to sort of tie all of those things together, and both for themselves as an organization and for the kind of wider networks that they're supporting. Does that answer that question, whoever posted that one?
That was me. Yeah, I think it does. So just to clarify, I had it in my head that it was like the first week was kind of kickoff, and they'd be doing, in the current format, they do a lot of the individual learning modules. And then there's sort of 2 weeks of user testing. And then there's a final week to kind of come up with the prototype solutions, and kind of do the wrap-up session and stuff. So are you saying that kind of shifts a little bit so that there's time for the next steps after the like prototype solution stage?
It does all have to be completed within the 4 weeks. Yeah. So it will be, it would probably need the 2 weeks of user research to shift a little bit forwards to allow that final week to be all about wrap up and sharing and consolidation. Yeah, does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just, I was trying to work it out from the template course that you have online, and then trying to see how that fits in with kind of the current timeline. So yeah, that works.
Great. Yeah, and if you, I mean, there's no reason actually why some of that kind of pulling together has to all be in the final week by any means. It can be something that they actually start at the very beginning, and kind of add to throughout. So again, there's no fixed specific schedule for that stuff. It's just as long as they kind of hit that outcome of having a playback to share with their network, and either a roadmap or a brief, depending on their needs, then that's kind of all we need from that last week. The next one is another one that's just come up in the chat today. So that part about adding lenses to find out what works makes me think, is there stuff you tried in iterations between Facetoface and Current that you already know doesn't work? You'd be brilliantly placed to answer this one.
Yes, I think I was thinking about a version of this last night. So it's a very perceptive question, because the answer is yes. I mean, we've cycled through a huge amount of things that we've tested and that just like either, you know, haven't worked out or produced a not the most helpful result or anything like that. And I was wondering, what is the best way to share that with everyone writing kind of their various kind of bids for this work. So I think actually one of the biggest reflections that I would have, the difference between face-to-face is that actually people are behaving, even though actually we're in a much, you know, more, and especially right from the start, because we started, you know, using these videos from April, which is why, like, they were filmed I think right at the end of March, which is why my hair was significantly shorter in the videos than it has reached nowadays. We expected people to be, you know, really in that crisis mindset, you know, we just need to consume it and do it, but actually we're really finding that people are in a much more reflective and deliberative space, and the energy is a lot calmer than it is in a face-to-face version of a workshop, which are, you know, typically very like high energy, high output, really taking people through that whole mental journey. People are actually really deeply engaging and choosing to slow it down a bit more. So I think that's just kind of one of the really biggest things that I would reflect on being a difference there. Yeah. And I would also just say on a smaller point, so really super granular, Miro we've tried Miro and it does not work so well with quite a lot of the charities on the much smaller kind of end of the digital maturity spectrum. I'm sure everyone here might as well have had a go at trying some of those various kind of tools, and we've also had quite a lot of charities. They might not apply for this fund, but quite a lot of people have been, say, using their phones and things like that as well to call in. So just being aware that any tools you might need to do and use collaboratively, have kind of a pen and paper backup in your mind too. Just not so that people don't feel excluded and things like that as well. Yeah, there's a lot to be said around what we have and haven't tried. Though, Ellie, what do you think is the best suggestion there?
Maybe if anyone adds any thoughts in the chat as to what would be like a most valuable way of communicating that stuff. Obviously, if for any successful partners, we will have like a chance to check in ahead of it starting well anyway. And at that point, you'd have like a much clearer plan of what you were planning to deliver and who the cohort were and all of those things. So it might be better place to have that discussion then. I think there's no immediate like howlers that sort of jump to mind that we would obviously otherwise kind of let you know ahead of time in that document. Don't do this definitely doesn't work. So yeah, I think probably just play it by ear a little bit, but if anyone has any other suggestions, go for it. We've got one more question here around, do we need to propose exactly how, e.g. the platform in the bid, or can we leave some of the decisions till we see info on the cohort and their previous tech use? So that's a good question. So one of the things that, yeah, I'd say a little bit of both probably. So it would be helpful to kind of get a flavor for how you see this kind of working practically, but then obviously we want you to be as responsive as possible to the needs of the individual organizations as they come in, and a lot of the Design Hop's success has been due down to just iterating very much on the fly according to the needs that are in the room. So I think, or virtual room as it now is. So yeah, I think as long as we can kind of see a sense of how you might approach that when you get the cohort, like, are there any ways that you would like to gather that information and understand how best to respond appropriately? Like, we've got one kind of outcome area around helping them sort of benchmark their sort of current digital maturity level and their current needs and confidence and stuff. So it might be around how you would approach that, or if there's something completely separate as well that you would like to do to help you understand how to deliver something more relevant and appropriate for them, then please flesh that out in your application. And then a couple of final questions. less ideation in the learning outcomes than there is in the existing design hop plan. Or is that a question? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, that's me phrasing it badly. Lucy's concerns over the timetable are really similar to mine, and I've rationalized it in my head as being there is a lot more in the design hop online content about ideation than there is about in the learning outcomes for this proposal. And I want to know whether that's right, whether that instinct is actually what you're intending, that almost the proposal is about the first 2/3 of the design hop and only a very small bit of the last third.
Is a really good observation, and I'd say you're right. Like, I guess in the design hop we try and take people through like the full service design process as a kind of a flavor of what it is, whereas this learning journey is basically mainly discovery. So I think the final section of the design hop we found has been really helpful to help kind of embed a lot of that understanding and the context for why the other stuff is useful. But in terms of where we want organizations to get to at the end of this program, we just really need them to have a solid understanding of the problem and their users. So kind of that's why there's much more of an emphasis on that side of things in the outcomes, and things like, yeah, the ideation around solutions and testing little prototyped things. That's something that it can be done relatively quickly and informally without kind of dwelling on that, just to kind of give an experience to the organizations that will be still valuable, but that's not like the core kind of focus of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Ellie and I were talking about this yesterday as well. So it's a good to notice in the timetable, and I think as well just being aware of the main learning outcomes, but also like where is the most responsible place to leave charities, given that not everyone will be able to secure further funding for that develop section, will choose to or will have capacity to, just leaving them in the best possible place. I think knowing all of the possible futures that await them too.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great addition. It's very important that we don't leave charities hanging. Cool. And then finally, I saw a final question from Bex in the chat. Do you have any timelines in place pre-4-week delivery for prep, etc.? So the timeline that we're working to is pretty tight, as I said before. You essentially have applications closing at the end of the week of the 14th. Is that right? No, the Monday the 7th, sorry. Yeah, sorry, there's so many timelines here. Monday the 7th at 5 p.m. applications close, then there's assessment and you'll be notified by the 18th of September. There's then 1 week of contracting before the actual design hop begins. So it's not very long, unfortunately, and yeah, we're sorry about that. We know it's tough, but yeah, we're hoping that it gives at least enough time to make that connection with the organization, the organizations in the cohort, and do any final kind of tweaks to your model, but that we're hoping that there will be a really clear sense of what you're proposing and all of that before you get to that stage, obviously, because it'll be in your application.
I've just spotted another question down there from Lucy. Is there any pitch process or is it all based on the application?
This is all based on the application. So yeah, kind of sadly, but again, our timescales are super tight, so we're having to cram this all in, unfortunately. What does the contracting week look like? On our side, it looks like our finance and ops team making sure that they have all of the relevant paperwork and get your payment stuff sorted. On your side, it probably means making sure that that contact with the cohort is made and any groundwork is laid, ready to kick off the following week. If there's anything else you think needs to be in place in that kind of week 0, then again, is a great opportunity to add that into your application. And if there's anything that you've reflected on from previous projects, I mean, we've definitely found that week 0s can be very valuable for kind of expectation setting, reinforcing the need to have some users available to test with or research with, that kind of stuff.
And with regards to the tool there as well, obviously you all have, you know, a chance to research and come up with your own opinions, but the first version of Thinkific that we used was free for us to use, and the only reason we actually upgraded it is because we wanted to have multiple courses that were all hidden, and that was a paid feature, but the original one was free to use as well there.
Yeah, sorry, the wording in my last question is, I don't mean spending on the costs of the tool. I mean, during contract week, can the partner agency be accruing days towards the budget of the project, or do we have a problem because you can't spend until your budget contract is signed?
That is an excellent question. I'm not sure I know the answer to, so I will get back to you and answer on the Q&A sheet. I think it should be okay. As long as it's not kind of accruing any extra to the budget that you'd already outlined. I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's okay. So it would buy you a slight bit more time, but I wouldn't bank on that being able to kind of be a big extra component of your delivery, I suppose, is just all I'm saying, just because on our side, we wouldn't be able to guarantee that you be kind of rolling in the first couple of days of that week. It might not be till that end of that week. Thank you. Oh, fantastic questions. Any more? Feel free to just put your hands up, and or have we covered everything? It's been quite wide ranging.
Catherine, did you have one? Was that you, Weaving? No.
Thank you. There's a lot there, and I think I sort of need to process some of it and start going through the application. I'm just wondering if more questions come up, whether there's any opportunity to contact you or whether this is it.
Yes, good question. You can continue to email us at partners@wearecast.org.uk right throughout the next few weeks. At the moment we're being super responsive. There's a couple of days next week when the entire cast office is off, so there might be a little bit of quiet on Tuesday and Wednesday next week, but it will then be manned again. Yes, absolutely. partners@wearecast.org.uk. Great. Super. Well, thank you all so much for your excellent questions and for clearly kind of thinking about it a lot as well, and giving it a lot of thought and care. That's always really lovely to see. Yeah, look forward to any more questions that you have, and connecting with some of you again, hopefully quite soon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
See you soon.
Thanks everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.